The Summer Hikaru Died is an ongoing BL horror mystery manga made by Mokumokuren about a protagonist, Yoshiki, coming to the realization that his best friend, Hikaru, is actually dead and whose body is possessed by a mysterious entity that's assumed his previous thoughts, memories, and personality. Theoretically, this would make it into the perfect copy of Hikaru, but it fundamentally doesn't understand what it means to be a human being, let alone be Hikaru. And that's why Yoshiki was able to figure out that it wasn't him before the rest of his friend group. I really don't want to spoil too much, especially since there's only 20 or so chapters as of the time of this recording, but I highly encourage you to just go ahead and read it. Go read it right now. I really want the main focus of this video to be an analysis over the complications of grief and how the inability to move on can be incredibly self-destructive. The story is still ongoing, so I'm pretty sure elements are going to change and alter with context as the story goes along, but I'm honestly just so excited to have an excuse to gush about this manga because I honestly really love it. So yeah, let's just get into it. Before we get to the analysis part, I just really want to take a moment to talk about the art for a second. Each panel has a very meticulous attention to detail that's able to seamlessly blend the beautiful, down-to-earth setting with some of the grotesque horror elements sprinkled throughout. I really love the way the author is able to capture the subtleties with light and shadow, character designs, and incredibly atmospheric backgrounds. And for as gentle as these panels are, the humans seem especially soft and vulnerable. And just the whole friend group feels genuine. Even with the background characters, you're able to see the subtleties of pain, joy, and sadness in their facial expressions. Also, the ghosts are spooky. Mokumokuren really knows how to make the environment extremely unsettling at times, especially for the use of suspenseful pacing for the reveals. Seriously, these designs are legitimately terrifying, and I really want to see more of them. If you look on Mokumokuren's Twitter, you can find their painted works for their characters. I honestly love the way that they use bright and vibrant colors, not only for some really wholesome pictures, but some of the more unsettling artwork is heightened by the saturation as well. I'm sure that the majority of these were made for fun, but I feel like some of them definitely had some foreshadowing in mind. The power of the story's artwork really gets you immersed and keeps you trapped in these moments of surreal intimacy that has a tendency to linger with you, and you're able to jump right into the manga's complex themes. When someone is no longer in your life, especially when it happens so suddenly, the best way that you can keep them alive is through your memories. There's a tendency for these memories to be distorted or romanticized, and the person you're remembering can be held to an idealized version of how you want them to be, for better or for worse. It's a natural human process that people tend to do as a coping mechanism, as a way to lessen the pain around loss. The idealized image of the person you remember can serve as a companion to the void that they left in your life. The real challenge lies in recognizing the nuances of your memory and being able to accept all of its imperfections. I mean, there's even a secondary character that just straight up tells you there's nothing good coming from clinging onto something that's been long since gone. Yoshiki gets to stay with Hikaru, but in many ways this version of him is just a soulless idea of what he's supposed to be. He's still very much grieving over the loss of his best friend, knowing that he'll never truly get him back. He has a lot of complicated feelings over the situation that he's not allowing himself to confront because even though this being isn't Hikaru, it's close enough. And from that, he's willing to do what he needs to do to either keep the facade up for as long as possible or risk the possibility of losing Hikaru all over again. Yoshiki is periodically sobbing over the fact that his friend is dead, and the entity acknowledges this, but only has the bare minimum of comprehending why. He's even devastated that the entities seem to have had no problem with nearly killing one of their friends, and that it's also killed another character off-screen, just for figuring out it wasn't human. We see Yoshiki constantly reason with himself that even if this thing isn't Hikaru, it just doesn't know any better, so he has to look after him. Its morality is very questionable, and will probably go out of its way to kill if it meant protecting itself in Yoshiki. It just fundamentally doesn't understand what it means to be a human being, with only excerpts that it can pull from Hikaru's memories. My prediction for this series is that this relationship just isn't going to end well. Oh, by the way, I really love the themes of existentialism. Yoshiki seemed to have had unrequited feelings for Hikaru before he passed, but because this thing isn't him, those feelings are gone. He feels more of an obligation to keep an eye on this version of Hikaru more than anything. This could easily be because he wants to make sure that the entity isn't dangerous, but it's also more likely that this is Yoshiki's way of clinging onto the idea of Hikaru without having to let him go. It was heavily implied that Hikaru didn't have feelings for Yoshiki back when he was alive, but this entity does seem to have major fondness with Yoshiki. It claims to not have romantic feelings on its own, but it's still using Hikaru's past emotions and memories to shape its own identity and come to its own conclusions about the people around it. It was because Hikaru felt such a strong bond with Yoshiki that once he found out its true identity, that it felt as though it couldn't kill him because it loves him in its own way. It's interesting to see this Hikaru be conflicted on whether or not it's feeling this way because of its past memories, or if it's genuinely feeling this way on its own. There are times where it seems to get upset or anxious over Yoshiki's disapproval, and there are even instances where it loses control of its form over the thought of having to potentially kill him. It leaves an interesting test of ambiguity to the audience. I guess it would be similar to an AI that genuinely forms its own consciousness, and whether or not it truly feels those emotions or if it's all just programming. I believe that in this way the entity does love Yoshiki, but only in the way that it can. Even still, this is not the version of Hikaru that Yoshiki had feelings for. At one point in the manga, it briefly mentions the story of a man who gets zapped by lightning, is deconstructed molecule by molecule, reassembled, and wakes up with swamp powers. And the friend group questions amongst themselves if the man was reborn, or if he died and the swamp man just took his place. Of course, this story is a parallel to the classic philosophical question: if you replace every part of a ship one by one until none of the original parts remain, is it still the same ship? Every person is truly unique, and in my opinion, even if you have all the materials needed to do a one-on-one impersonation of someone, those closest to them are still going to be able to tell if you're a fake. Yoshiki was the first person to realize this, of course, but slowly the rest of the friend group is starting to get suspicious as well. I think my only little piece of critique of the story so far is that I wish we got to see a couple of prologue chapters to truly get to know Hikaru when he was alive and how Yoshiki was able to come to the conclusion that it wasn't him. We do get a couple of glimpses through the manga, but they're pretty brief in my opinion. The exploration of existential themes really adds layers to the storyline, especially since Yoshiki navigates his unrequited feelings for Hikaru and struggles with the obligation to care for an entity that is now inhabiting his best friend's corpse. The ambiguity surrounding the entity's emotions, shaped by Hikaru's memories, raises questions about consciousness, what it means to love, the ability to cope with reality and loss, and the nature of what it means to be a human. As Yoshiki confronts the distorted image of Hikaru that the entity represents, we're also meant to reflect on our own experiences with loss, or maybe what we might do in that situation, and the ways in which we use our coping mechanisms can ultimately help us in the long term. Thank you very much for listening for this long. Very sorry if I sound off. I've unfortunately been sick for like 3 weeks and I kept hoping that I would recover enough for my voice to be fully fixed, but I figured I just have to record now, if anything. But yeah, hopefully I've piqued your interest in the summer that Hikaru died and that you decide to check it out if you haven't already. This probably sounds very corny, but please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you again for watching, and I hope to see you soon. Bye!